the Highlands in Iceland. It's an incredible place. So the Highlands in Iceland, this huge area in the center of the country, it's one of the last remaining wildernesses in Europe. And where we are today, it's incredibly remote here. This huge stretch you can see behind me, this is the river Tungna, which is a river that flows all the way through Iceland. It's about a kilometer and a half wide here. And it's very remote. This is a remote part of the Highlands. To get here is quite a challenge. You really have to know where you're going. We're here today with my friend Jeroen, who's a local guide, and he's brought us here today. We're using a high wheelbase Land Rover, which is really the only vehicle that can get you here. The kind of tracks that we're driving on are farmers' tracks. They're not used particularly often, but it's the only way that you can get to places as remote as this. Now, the reason that we've come here is this riverbed. It doesn't look all that photogenic when you're standing next to it. There's not really much that you can see, but as soon as you get a drone up and you start to look down, there's these incredible abstract shapes, these real wonderful images of the river braids with the glacial meltwaters flowing down through the valley, creating these almost three-dimensional textures. So we've got the drones up now. It's a little bit tricky. It's quite windy. There's rain in the air, so there's a few challenges involved. And anyone who knows me knows that I'm not crazy about flying drones, but it really is worth it for the kind of images and the kind of footage that we're getting.
One of the issues to take into account when you're doing drone photography is the fact that once you get the drone up in the air, it's not always immediately apparent what the image is going to be. In this particular location, we had to fly around quite a little bit, trying to find particularly interesting parts in the river, parts of the river where you could really feel that three dimensions, where the streams were almost kind of going over and under each other. And that wasn't right next to where we were parked. It was quite a long way away, about a kilometer away out across the river, which means you have to take into account the battery life of the drone. You've got to be able to fly it over there, find your composition, and then make sure that you've got plenty of battery to bring it back. So this is kind of one of the issues that we had, was exploring, flying around, looking at the different aspects of the river, and then trying to find a particular spot which really captured, which really had the compositional elements that you were looking for. So parts where the stream was kind of flowing down, where you could feel a flow through the image, where you really got the sense of those kind of three dimensions, and not places where there was lots and lots of water, because where the water was quite deep and it had been raining quite recently, the river was really thick, so you didn't really get any contrast or any definition there. So this, in the end, was the part of the river that I liked the most and that I thought was the most photogenic, and the one that I concentrated on capturing and shooting a frame. About 100 meters up here, and I tried different compositions, tried shooting it horizontally, tried turning the drone through 90 degrees and capturing it vertically, which was in the end the image that I preferred most, where you had this stream just flowing down from the top of the frame to the bottom. Now, further down the stream, you've got this incredible location where two rivers run into each other. On the left, you've got a sediment-filled river, and on the right, you've got a freshwater river, which kind of runs side by side with each other before they mix together, which just creates this incredible effect. Now, it had been raining really, really heavily, so to shoot the River Braids here was very, very different, because there was no kind of bank showing. You couldn't see the bottom of the river, so you lost that 3D effect. But looking straight down from above, the sediment-filled water was creating this incredible kind of flow around these rocks here, which I thought made for a really nice composition. So the framing here is just looking straight down, trying to find a position, again, using vertical framing, where the river's flowing from the top to the bottom and creating these lovely swirls and walls. This is actually I couldn't fit this in one frame without going very high, and I didn't want to go more than 100 meters. So this is actually 4 images shot as a panorama and then stitched together. On the same day, we visited another location that's right in the middle of the Highlands, this incredible crater that you can see here. Now again, this is the kind of spot that you can drive past on the road and it doesn't look like anything. But it's only when you get in a drone into the air that you can see that it looks like this dragon's eye with this beautiful blue colored water in the middle of this black sand crater. Now, there's no elevation around here. There's no mountain that you can climb up to look down into this crater. You have to use a drone here. Now, the issue with composition here is that this is a huge crater, so it's trying to find, again, the right position and the right orientation for the crater. Now, I flew backwards and forwards, got closer to it, got further away. In the end, the framing that I liked the most was kind of using the crater as a foreground with the river flowing off into the background. We had lots of low cloud and mist, which just really kind of made the background to give it this wonderful ethereal effect. But again, the scene was so big that I couldn't fit it in one frame. So this is actually two images shot side by side and then again stitched together as a panorama. And this turned out being one of my favorite images from the trip. One of the things that I really wanted to do on this trip was really push a lot deeper into the Highlands, because it's an absolutely huge area and there's just so much to see there. So we really took the time and made plans to visit parts of the Highlands that we'd never seen, and just go a little bit further and try to push beyond what we know about the place. Now, whenever you're doing that, you really need to be well prepared. The first and most important thing is to have a really good vehicle. You can see here we're driving a big Land Rover Defender, which can pretty much get us everywhere that we want to go. It's got a high wheelbase. It's got a snorkel. We always made sure we had a full tank of petrol, plenty of water, GPS coverage, and maps as well, and to have an idea of where you're going. And then it really starts to feel like an adventure, which is something that I do love about landscape photography. It's that kind of exploring and being in places that really just move you and blow you away. Just these kind of locations where you're absolutely overwhelmed by the intensity of the landscape.
This is Langisjor, one of the remotest parts of the Highlands, and it's absolutely otherworldly. Just looking back over there, there's this rolling desert of black volcanic sand punctuated by these mountains and bits of green moss. It's absolutely otherworldly, and it's so incredible to shoot here. We've been using the telephoto lens just to compress the landscape together, just pick out interesting parts. It's the kind of place that wherever you point your camera, you see something really interesting and really unique. Now, in this particular area, we've come up here because the lake Langisjor, it's a huge lake here. It's one of the biggest lakes in Iceland, and certainly the most remote. It's quite a challenge to get here. We were driving a couple of hours through rivers across this kind of terrain just to arrive here. We're hoping to find a viewpoint where we can get some good shots of it, but it's quite challenging. The roads here are quite rough, and even though I'm here with a local guide who's explored this area, we're still kind of like pushing at the boundaries of what we know and trying to find new spots. So it's fun. I mean, it's seeing places that I've never seen before is always exciting, and a landscape like this, it's just the kind of place that you can get lost in.
Now, composing here was a little bit of a challenge. The first thing is to find an actual focal point that you can build the image around, and I found this kind of small hill here that was sitting in the middle of the frame. And then you kind of you're trying to get that feeling of this endless expansive landscape. And what really doesn't work is a wide angle here, because you just get lots of uninteresting foreground going right up to the camera. So it's best to shoot it with a telephoto lens, because that's always also going to compress the landscape. It's going to bring some of those distant mountains closer to you and create the different layers of the landscape, compress them together, giving you these different lines. Now, when I was looking through the viewfinder and building the image around the focal point, I really felt that there was a lot of strong horizontals here, the different lines and the different layers. It really kind of felt like it lent itself to a letterbox, to a panoramic framing. So again, this is actually shot with two images side by side with a focal point in the middle, with a telephoto just to compress all the layers together and bring some of those distant mountains closer, but really with the emphasis of the focal point of this single kind of black mountain stood here in the midst of this vast alien looking landscape. Now, when we reached a point where we were up above the lake itself, it was one of those places where the view is absolutely amazing, but it doesn't necessarily work photographically. We're kind of midway up the lake, and we could look out over the lake with a telephoto lens, but there was no trail going down to the edge of the lake, which was still a few kilometers away. And as soon as we went forward, we would lose the elevation, so we just end up on the bank of the lake, which kind of wasn't going to work photographically. So I did play around with a few with the telephoto, trying to kind of make some compositions work, but the fact that we had too much kind of ground in between us and the lake just really made it challenging. It was really windy as well, so we couldn't really get the drone up. There's a lot of ice and rain in the air. Some of my colleagues did, but I wasn't really quite brave enough for that. On the way back, though, we did make a stop at this magical spot, which is the rivers flowing down next to the lake. It reaches a point here where the rivers are kind of flowing around, creating these mud flats. And it just looks absolutely amazing. Now, again, it's the kind of place where you really notice how wonderful it is when you get the drone up. It's quite difficult to photograph it from the land because there's no elevation. But as soon as you get a drone in the air and start to look down, then it really does offer these incredible views. So the challenge here is trying to get the drone in a place where you really capture the whole sweep, the full scale of the landscape. And that, again, wasn't possible from nearby where we were. We had to fly the drone quite a long way away, more than a kilometer away here, kind of turning back and looking along the river. And again, the scene was just too big to do with one wide angle image. So this is actually 9 frames shot together in a square. So 3 along the top, 3 along the middle, and 3 along the bottom. And then stitched together in Lightroom just to capture the scale of this, because you really can't imagine how big this is, how massive this scene is. Just to zoom in here, this little white dot, that's our Jeep. Now, the drone does have an automated function for shooting panoramas, but it's not something I like to use. I prefer to do it manually. So basically, I just work out what my composition is going to be and then just rotate the drone through the 3 shots at the top, and then just tilt the gimbal down a bit, do the 3 shots along the middle, and then the 3 shots along the bottom. The most important thing is making sure that you've got a big overlap of about 30 to 40% of the image, which just makes it much easier for Lightroom to stitch together. And because you're a long way from the foreground here, the drone's quite high up, nothing is close to the camera, you don't really have to worry about parallax errors or anything like that. Now, when I was flying above the scene, I noticed these mud flats here where the water was flowing through the mud, and the kind of streams running in from the side made it look like veins. Getting the drone directly above and looking straight down created this really nice abstract frame. I thought it was something really different. It was kind of something, it wasn't what I'd expected to shoot at this particular location. Compositionally, again, what I was looking for, you've just got the simple form, you've got very few colors, so it's really all about the form of the line flowing through and the different veins, the different streams running into the side to create something quite abstract where it really is, you're really not quite sure what it is that you're looking at.
This is probably my favorite waterfall in Iceland. There's just so much to see here. Every time I come, I find a different way of shooting it. You can shoot it from up at the top of the canyon looking down and along the valley. You can shoot it down from the bottom of the canyon where we are now. You can shoot it wide with the river. You can shoot telephoto and get closer to it and compress the water. Now you have to put up with the spray and the wind because it's always windy here and the wind's blowing the spray down the valley, which makes photography a little bit hard because you're getting lots of dots of spray on the front element all the time. But every time I come here, I always find it such an incredibly productive place to be and always end up going back to the car with a big smile on my face and really glad that I came.
Now, as I said, there really are so many different ways to shoot this waterfall, and I wanted to try to do something different. So I tried doing a frame with the drone where I was standing on this kind of little hill here and looking down the valley towards the waterfall. It did work really nice with video, but getting it absolutely right for photograph was quite challenging because the waterfall is quite far away, so it becomes quite small in the image. And I couldn't find a spot where I was exactly standing beneath the water, so just to try to separate me from the rest of the landscape. What I thought is because I had my blue jacket on, I kind of get lost in the landscape here. I really needed to stand out a little bit more. But it is interesting. It's always nice to try to get a different composition from a place that you've shot before. But in the end, the thing that I really love doing here is shooting with a telephoto from the bottom of the falls and then just compressing a figure against the bottom of the waterfalls. You cut off the top of the waterfalls and it kind of gives you this abstract feel. You don't realize how big the waterfall is. You've just got the water flowing into the top of the image which really kind of, I feel, focuses the eye on just the water and the figure, and then just a really fast shutter speed here to freeze the water, just to give it these really fascinating shapes where it looks like these kind of curtains as it's falling. Now, getting a fast shutter here is relatively challenging because it's quite dark down there, so you have to use a higher ISO. Got the aperture wide open just to get a really fast shutter speed of around 1/500, which is what you need, or the minimum of what you need to freeze water like this. Also, you have to keep going back and cleaning the lens of the camera because it does get really wet. There's a lot of spray flying around at the bottom of the waterfall, particularly as the wind gusts up the valley. It's a very windy place, but still, it's really a lot of fun to shoot there, standing on the rock, getting absolutely blasted by the water. All you can hear is the noise of the waterfall hitting the rock, and you're just getting soaked. And it's just such an incredible experience.
So today's the last day in the Highlands. Tomorrow we'll be heading back to Reykjavik, and after that heading back home. It's been such a cool trip, really, really brilliant. I've seen so many parts of the Highlands that I've never seen before, and that's one of the things I love about Iceland and the Highlands in particular, is that I've been coming here for 10 years, and every time I come back I see some new stuff, but I always leave with more stuff that I know that I've yet to discover. It always feels like I've just barely scratched the surface. There's just so much to see here. Every road has just such unexplored potential. It's just such a fascinating place to visit. So that's it for this video. I hope it's been fun. I hope it's been interesting. Thanks so much for watching. I come back to Iceland every year with workshops, so if you'd like to join me here next year or sometime in the future, there's full information on my website, as well as all the other workshops that I'll be doing. I'll be going to Namibia, Greenland, the Dolomites, Lofoten, so if there's anything that's interesting, drop me a line, get in touch with me, and I'll get back to you. And as ever, thanks so much for watching and for supporting the channel. Good luck with all your photography, and take care. See you next time.